Your sister Rachel needs the space more than you do, Mom declared, tossing my belongings into cardboard boxes. She's starting her residency at Metropolitan Hospital. A doctor needs proper rest. I stood in the doorway of what had been my bedroom for 25 years, watching them transform it into Rachel's new sanctuary. The medical textbooks were already claiming my shelves, her designer clothes hanging in my closet. Where am I supposed to go? I asked, though I already had plans they knew nothing about. You can sleep on the couch, Dad said, not even looking up from where he was installing Rachel's new desk. Or better yet, get a real job in your own place. Playing with computers in your room isn't a career. If they'd bothered to look at those computers, they might have noticed I was running a multi-million-dollar tech company from that very desk they were now throwing out. 3 years of careful planning, coding through the night, building something revolutionary, all while they bragged about Rachel's medical school achievements at every family dinner. Rachel needs to focus on her career, Mom continued, dropping my coding books into a donation box. She's going to be a surgeon. What are you doing? Making websites. I picked up my laptop bag, the only thing that mattered. Everything else was replaceable. Something like that. See? Even you can't explain it properly. Mom shook her head. Rachel has a clear path. She's going to save lives. You're just wasting time. Little did they know that my wasted time had just closed a deal that would change everything. The papers had been signed yesterday. I was now the owner of the city's most prestigious office building, the Metropolitan Tower. The same building where Dad's law firm rented 3 floors, and coincidentally, where Rachel would be working at the hospital's administrative offices. I'll be out by tonight, I said quietly. Finally showing some sense? Dad looked up. The law firm is always hiring paralegals. Not as prestigious as being a doctor, but at least it's a real job. I didn't bother responding. My phone buzzed, a message from my COO. Everything's ready at the new office. Security protocols updated. When should we announce? Give me 2 weeks, I typed back. Perfect timing for Rachel's first day at her new job. That evening, I watched from my car as they helped Rachel move in, carrying boxes of her things into what used to be my space. Mom was practically glowing with pride. My daughter, the doctor. I could hear her telling the neighbors. They didn't even notice when I drove away, didn't ask where I was going. The answer would have shocked them, to my new penthouse office at the top of Metropolitan Tower, where I oversaw an empire they couldn't begin to understand. 2 weeks passed quickly. I spent them setting up my new life, watching from my floor-to-ceiling windows as the city moved below. Every morning I saw Dad's car pull into his reserved spot on the law firm's floor. Soon Rachel would be joining the daily parade of professionals entering my building. The day before Rachel's first day, I got another text from my COO. New security protocols active. All tenants must update their passes. Your family's firms haven't responded to the notices. They will, I replied, smiling. Tomorrow. That night Mom called, the first time since they'd kicked me out. Rachel starts her new job tomorrow. At Metropolitan Tower. Isn't that amazing? Maybe you could come see her office sometime. If you get a real job, of course. Don't worry, Mom, I said, looking out at my building glowing in the night sky. I have a feeling I'll be seeing her office very soon. The next morning I watched through the security feeds as chaos unfolded in the lobby. Dad was waving his old access card at the new terminals, his face getting redder by the minute. Rachel stood beside him in her pristine white coat, looking increasingly panicked as her first day as a doctor was being delayed. What do you mean our access is denied? Dad was shouting at the security guard. I've been a tenant here for 15 years. I apologize, sir, the guard replied calmly, following the new protocols perfectly. But all access cards needed to be updated last week. The notices were sent out repeatedly. Do you know who I am? I'm James Wilson of Wilson and Partners Law. Sir. And as per the new ownership's policies, even long-term tenants need proper clearance. Mom, who had come along to document Rachel's big day for social media, stepped forward. This is ridiculous. My daughter is starting her residency today. She can't be late. I understand, ma'am, but I need authorization from Madam Owner. Then call her. Rachel demanded, checking her watch nervously. I already did, the guard said, glancing at the private elevator that only I could access. She's on her way down. I stepped out of the elevator, dressed in a tailored Chanel suit that cost more than Dad's monthly rent. The lobby went silent as I walked toward them, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Access problems? I asked quietly. Mom's phone slipped from her hands. Dad's jaw dropped. Rachel's perfectly practiced doctor's composure cracked. Sarah. Mom whispered. Actually, it's Ms. Wilson in this building, I corrected her. Or Madam Owner as the staff prefer. This is impossible, Dad stammered. You make websites. I turned to the security guard. Please pull up the ownership documents on the main screen. The massive lobby display lit up with my company's acquisition papers. There was my signature, clear as day, at the bottom of the multi-billion-dollar purchase agreement. Those websites you never bothered to look at? I said, turning back to my stunned family. They revolutionized building management systems. Every major property management company in the country uses them now, including the one I bought this building from. Rachel found her voice first. But my job, the hospital offices, are still yours, I assured her. Unlike some people, I don't believe in throwing family members out when it's inconvenient. I gave Mom a pointed look. However, there are some new terms we need to discuss. I nodded to my assistant, who appeared with 3 folders. Your new lease agreements. Dad, your firm's rent is being adjusted to market rate, no more friendly discounts. Rachel, the hospital's administrative office lease includes a clause about mandatory technology training. And Mom. I smiled. You'll need to schedule an appointment if you want to visit. No more unauthorized social media photo shoots in my lobby. You can't do this, Mom protested weakly. Actually, I can. Just like you could throw me out of my room. Interesting how property ownership works, isn't it? I turned to the security guard. Please issue them temporary passes for today. Their permanent access will be granted once they've signed the new agreements and completed the required orientations. As they stood there, clutching their temporary badges, I heard Mom mutter, I don't understand. You were nothing. Just playing with computers in your room. No, Mom. I was building an empire. You just couldn't see it because it didn't fit your definition of success. I checked my watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting to attend. In my building. 1 month later, I sat in my penthouse office, reviewing the latest tenant reports. Dad's law firm had quietly signed the new lease at triple their previous rent. Rachel had completed her mandatory tech training, though she'd failed twice before passing. Mom had tried to sneak into the building 4 times for social media photos before finally accepting she needed formal approval. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Wilson? Your family is here for the requested meeting. Send them in. They entered like chastened children, Dad without his usual legal bluster, Rachel missing her superior smirk, and Mom clutching her designer bag like a shield. The city stretched out behind me through floor-to-ceiling windows, a constant reminder of who owned what now. Sit, I gestured to the chairs facing my desk. We need to discuss some changes. More rent increases? Dad asked nervously. Actually, I pulled out 3 folders. These are about my old room. Mom straightened defensively. Rachel needs that space for her residency. Let me stop you right there. I opened the first folder. These are photos taken yesterday of my old room. Rachel isn't using it for rest or study. It's become her social media studio for her doctor influencer videos. Rachel flushed. How did you? I had it monitored, of course, just like I monitor every square foot of this building. I turned to the second folder. Here's something interesting: Rachel's actual working hours. According to hospital records, she spends more time taking Instagram photos in the hospital wing than attending to patients. You can't access those records. Rachel protested. I own the building, remember? Including all its security feeds and access logs. I opened the third folder. And Mom's little social media empire? The one she's been building by sneaking into my building for photo ops? It's all been running on servers I own. What do you want? Dad asked quietly. The same thing I've always wanted: respect. Recognition. A family that sees me for who I am, not who they wanted me to be. I stood up, walking to the window. You kicked me out because Rachel needed the space. Now let's talk about who really needs what. I pressed a button and the wall screen lit up with charts and graphs. Dad, your firm's billable hours are down 40% since last month. Want to know why? Your outdated systems are costing you clients. Rachel, your patient satisfaction scores are the lowest in the hospital because you're too busy filming TikToks to actually practice medicine. And Mom. I turned to her. Your social media influence relies entirely on access to this building, access you no longer have. Are you going to throw us out? Rachel whispered. No. Unlike you, I understand the difference between property and power. I handed them each a new document. These are your choices. They read in silence. Dad spoke first. You want us to convert my firm to your tech systems? Full digital transformation. Your choice is simple: evolve or watch your firm become obsolete. Rachel read her paper next. Mandatory patient care hours? Social media restrictions. Be a doctor first, influencer second. That's what the hospital space is for, isn't it? Mom's hands shook as she read hers. Building access only for legitimate business purposes. No more unauthorized photos. No more pretending you own the place. No more using my success to fuel your social media fantasy. And my room? Rachel asked. Convert it back to my home office within 48 hours, or I'll increase the hospital wing's rent by 200%. I smiled. Your choice. They sat there, papers in hand, finally understanding the new power dynamic. One more thing, I added, pressing another button. The screens showed their social media accounts, all of them. Every post where you mocked my computer hobby, every comment about me wasting my life, every family photo where I was cropped out. I've kept them all. Think carefully about your next moves. Dad signed his paper first. Then Rachel. Mom hesitated longest but eventually added her signature. Welcome to the digital age, I said, collecting the signed documents. Where real success isn't measured in square footage or social media followers, but in actual impact. As they left my office, I called out, "Oh, and Mom? Next time you want to post about your successful daughters, make sure you mention both of us. After all, I own the platforms you post on too." The door closed behind them and I turned back to my city view. Sometimes the best room isn't the one you're kicked out of, it's the one you build yourself, 50 stories above those who underestimated you.
I always dreamed my wedding day would be perfect. Instead, it became the day I finally showed my family who I really was. But to understand what happened at that reception, you need to know how I got there. My name is Emma Chen, and I grew up in the shadow of my father's expectations. Harrison Chen wasn't just a successful businessman. He was a titan of industry who had built Chen Technologies from nothing into a multi-million-dollar empire. Every dinner conversation revolved around business strategies, market expansions, and the legacy he was building, a legacy I was apparently never good enough to be part of. Business is in our blood, he would say, looking proudly at my older brother Marcus. Well, most of our blood. That last part was always directed at me, along with a disapproving glance that made me feel about 2 inches tall. While Marcus followed perfectly in our father's footsteps. Wharton Business School, MBA, fast track to executive positions, I chose a different path. Computer engineering. My father's voice dripped with disdain when I announced my college major. Engineers work for people like us, Emma. They don't lead companies. But I saw something he didn't. While he was focused on old-school business models and traditional corporate structures, I recognized that the future belonged to those who could build it, line by code line. I graduated at the top of my class, but my father didn't attend the ceremony. He was too busy attending Marcus's MBA graduation that same weekend. An actual achievement, he called it. For 3 years after college, I worked at various tech startups, learning everything I could about both the technical and business sides of the industry. My father saw it as aimless drifting. When are you going to get a real job? He would ask at every family gathering. Marcus is already a vice president at Chen Technologies. What he didn't know was that I was building something that would change everything. It started in my tiny apartment's spare bedroom. A revolutionary cybersecurity system that could adapt and evolve in real time to counter new threats. While Marcus was attending board meetings and playing golf with executives, I was coding until 3 a.m., fueled by coffee and determination. The first version of my security software caught the attention of a small venture capital firm. Their initial investment allowed me to hire 2 other engineers and rent a small office space. My mother, during one of her rare moments away from my father's influence, secretly helped me furnish it. I don't understand what you're building, she admitted as we assembled cheap desks from IKEA. But I've never seen you so passionate about anything. The next 2 years were a blur of coding, pitching to investors, and slowly building my company, Secure Core Technologies. We won our first major contract with a mid-sized bank, then another. Then a government agency quietly reached out about using our software. I kept my success quiet. At family dinners, I still played the role of the underachieving daughter. When my father bragged about Marcus's latest accomplishment, I would smile and push food around my plate. When relatives asked about my little computer job, I gave vague answers about doing okay. Then I met David. He was different from anyone I'd ever known. A brilliant architect who saw the world in terms of possibilities rather than limitations. He didn't care about my family's money or status. In fact, the first time we met, he had no idea who the Chens were. "You seem surprised," I said when he finally found out about my family. "I am," he admitted. "You're nothing like what I'd expect from a wealthy family's daughter. You're real." We fell in love over late-night conversations about design principles, technological innovation, and our dreams for the future. When he proposed a year later, I didn't hesitate to say yes. My father, of course, had opinions about that too. "An architect?" He scoffed during dinner. "Couldn't you at least find someone in finance or business? Someone with real potential?" I gripped my fork tightly. David is incredibly successful. His firm just won the contract for the new downtown development project. A glorified construction worker, my father waved dismissively. "At least Marcus's wife comes from a good family. Her father's company is listed on the NYSE." I looked at Marcus's wife, Catherine, who sat there with her perfect makeup and society smile, and felt a wave of pity. She was exactly what our father wanted, a proper corporate wife who attended charity galas and knew which wines to serve at dinner parties. The wedding planning became a battlefield. My father insisted on turning it into a networking event, inviting business associates and potential clients. My mother tried to mediate but ultimately deferred to him, as she always did. Even Marcus pulled me aside one day at the office. "Just let Dad have his way," he advised. "You know how he gets. Besides, it's not like you're paying for it." But I was. Every cent of my wedding was being paid for by Secure Core's profits. Not that anyone knew that. What they also didn't know was that Secure Core had just gone public in a quiet but incredibly successful IPO. My ownership stake was worth $89 million, and that wasn't even the biggest secret I was keeping. 3 months before the wedding, I discovered something interesting during the routine security audit. Chen Technologies, my father's precious company, had serious vulnerabilities in their cybersecurity infrastructure. The kind of vulnerabilities that my software was designed to prevent. I could have warned them. Instead, I waited and watched through my networks as multiple small breaches occurred. Nothing damaging. I made sure of that. But enough to send their stock price dropping and create panic among the board members. Then, through a series of shell companies, I began buying shares. Lots of shares. The week before my wedding, I owned 22% of Chen Technologies. My father had no idea that his disappointing daughter was now one of his company's largest shareholders. The wedding day arrived sunny and perfect. The ceremony was beautiful, exactly as David and I had planned. But I knew the real show would be at the reception, when my father would give his toast. I sat at the head table, holding David's hand under the white tablecloth, watching my father stand up with his champagne glass. He was wearing his favorite Tom Ford suit, the one he saved for closing major deals. The room fell silent as he began to speak. Little did he know that in the next few minutes, his entire world was about to turn upside down. My father stood at the microphone, champagne glass glinting under the reception hall's crystal chandeliers. 200 guests watched him, expecting the usual polished performance he gave at corporate events. But I could see something different in his eyes tonight, a coldness, an edge. "When Emma was born," he began, his voice carrying across the silent room, "I had such high hopes. The Chen family has a legacy of excellence in business. My father built his first company from nothing. I transformed it into an empire. And my son Marcus," he gestured to my brother, who sat smugly at his table, "is carrying on that proud tradition." He paused, taking a sip of champagne. I felt David's hand tighten around mine. "But Emma chose a different path. Against all our family's advice, she went into, he wrinkled his nose slightly, computer programming. A path for people who work for others, not leaders. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw David start to stand, but I squeezed his hand, holding him back. Not yet. And now she's married an architect. My father's lips curved in what might have looked like a smile to others, but I recognized it as a sneer. I suppose we should be grateful she's found someone who can at least design the buildings that real business leaders will work in. Catherine, Marcus's wife, let out a small laugh, quickly covered by her napkin. A few of my father's business associates chuckled politely. The truth is, my father continued, his voice hardening, some people just aren't meant for greatness. Emma will never amount to anything significant. She's been, and always will be, a disappointment to the Chen legacy. The room fell silent. Even those who had laughed looked uncomfortable now. My mother stared at her plate, hands twisted in her lap. Marcus couldn't quite hide his smirk. I stood up slowly, smoothing my wedding dress. Thank you for those heartfelt words, Dad. I have a few things to say too. I nodded to Michael, my chief technology officer, who had been posing as a photographer. He pressed a button on his laptop, and suddenly the large screens around the reception hall, the ones my father had insisted on having for his business presentation later, came to life. What is this? My father demanded, but his voice faltered as he saw what was displayed. On the screens were Secure Core's financial statements, stock prices, and most importantly, my ownership stake. $89 million in my name alone. You see, Dad, while you were busy grooming Marcus to run your company, I was building my home. Secure Core Technologies, perhaps you've heard of it. We're the ones who developed the adaptive cybersecurity system that's now used by most major banks and government agencies. My father's face had gone pale. Marcus was frantically typing on his phone, probably looking up Secure Core's public records. But that's not all. I continued, my voice steady. 3 months ago, we discovered some interesting vulnerabilities in Chen Technologies' security infrastructure, the kind that could devastate a company if exploited by the wrong people. Another nod to Michael, and new information appeared on the screens. Stock purchases, board meeting minutes, ownership percentages. I could have warned you, I said, walking around the table to stand directly in front of my father. Instead, I watched your stock price drop as minor breaches occurred. And then, through various shell companies, I started buying shares. Understanding dawned in my father's eyes. No, he whispered. Yes, I smiled. As of this morning, I own 22% of Chen Technologies. And tomorrow when the market opens, I'll own even more because tonight, several board members will announce their retirement. Board members who, coincidentally, have all agreed to sell their shares to me. Marcus stood up so quickly he knocked over his champagne. You can't do this. Dad, she can't do this. Actually, I can. And I have. I turned to address the shocked guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce that effective tomorrow, Secure Core Technologies will begin a merger with Chen Technologies. We'll be implementing our superior security systems, modernizing their outdated infrastructure, and bringing the company into the 21st century. My father finally found his voice. You planned this. You planned all of this. I learned from the best, Dad. Isn't this what you always taught us? Identify weaknesses, seize opportunities, never show your hand until you're ready to win. The room erupted in chaos. Business reporters who had come to cover the society wedding of the year were suddenly scrambling to report on the biggest tech merger story instead. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red, while Marcus looked like he might faint. I walked back to David, who was beaming with pride. He knew everything, of course. Had known for months. Ready to face the cameras, Mr. Chen? I asked. He grinned. Lead the way, Mrs. Chen Pierce, CEO of Secure Core Technologies. The aftermath was everything I expected and more. The merger made headlines across every business publication. Chen Technologies stock soared once investors learned of Secure Core's involvement. Marcus was quietly moved to a non-executive position, and my father had to adapt to a new reality. His first board meeting under my leadership was particularly memorable. This is the security upgrade proposal, I said, sliding documents across the table to him. I'll need your signature by the end of the day. He stared at me for a long moment, then picked up his pen. You really did it, he said quietly. You built something remarkable. Yes, I replied. I did. Without your help, without your approval, and without following your path. And that's what really bothers you, isn't it? He signed the papers without responding. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. Your mother wants you to come to dinner on Sunday. I smiled. I'll be there. And Dad, this time, I'll give the toast. 1 year later, Chen Secure Core Technologies was valued at over $3 billion. My father still sits on the board, though now he listens more than he speaks. Marcus found his own path, starting a small consulting firm. Turns out he's better at advising businesses than running them. And my mother, she finally started speaking up at family dinners. David and I bought a penthouse overlooking the city, but we kept my old apartment where I built Secure Core's first prototype. Sometimes I go there to work late at night, remembering those early days when everyone thought I was wasting my time. The media loves to call it a revenge story, how the underestimated daughter took over her father's company, but it's really about something else. It's about building something on your own terms, about proving that success doesn't have to follow someone else's blueprint. Last week, my father actually asked for my advice about a new tech investment. You see things differently, he admitted. You see the future. I looked out at the city skyline from my office, the same office that used to be his. No, Dad, I said. I don't just see the future. I build it. And that's worth more than any inheritance he could have given me.
You call this a business? My sister Amanda sneered, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor of my small boutique. It's barely bigger than my walk-in closet. I continued arranging the handcrafted jewelry display, refusing to let her see how much her words stung. The morning sun filtered through the large front window, making the gemstones sparkle, each piece carefully selected, each design meticulously created in my workshop in the back. At least I have paying customers, I said quietly, straightening a necklace. How's your third failed startup doing? Amanda's perfectly painted lips tightened. That's different, Emma. I take risks. Think big. This. She gestured dismissively around my shop. This is just playing it safe. The bell above the door chimed and I looked up to see my parents walking in. Great. The whole family circus had arrived. Dad took one look around my 800 square foot space and shook his head. The disappointment in his eyes was familiar. I'd seen it ever since I turned down the executive position at his company, Davidson Industries, to pursue my own dreams. Emma, he said, his voice carrying that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate, your mother and I are worried about you. You're 29, and this is all you have to show for yourself. I bit back a sharp reply. They had no idea. No clue about what I'd built behind the scenes while they were busy dismissing my little shop. We're having a family dinner tonight, Mom added, adjusting her Cartier bracelet. To celebrate some exciting news. Davidson Industries is about to close the biggest deal in its history. That's wonderful, I said, keeping my voice neutral. But I have inventory to do tonight. See? Amanda smirked. This is why you're being left behind. While Dad's about to sign a $100 million contract with Global Tech, you're counting beads in your tiny shop. I froze. Global Tech. They had no idea. This merger will change everything, Dad said proudly. Once we acquire Global Tech's manufacturing division, Davidson Industries will dominate the market. I smiled slightly, remembering the stack of documents sitting in my office safe. Not my shop office, my other office in the gleaming skyscraper downtown. You should really come to dinner, Emma, Mom pressed. Meet some real business people. Maybe they can mentor you, help you think bigger. The irony almost made me laugh. If they only knew that their precious merger, the deal they were so proud of, couldn't happen without my signature. Because while they were busy mocking my little shop, they had no idea that 5 years ago, I had quietly founded Phoenix Enterprises, now the parent company of Global Tech. I'm sorry, I said, not sorry at all. I have other commitments tonight. Dad's face darkened. There's that attitude again. This is why you'll never succeed in business, Emma. You don't understand the importance of connections, of being there when it matters. I watched them leave, Amanda throwing one last contemptuous look at my tiny store. The bell chimed again, its cheerful sound a stark contrast to the tension they left behind. Pulling out my phone, I dialed my assistant at Phoenix Enterprises. Sarah? Move up tomorrow's meeting with Davidson Industries to 9 a.m. And make sure the conference room camera is recording. I want to remember every expression when they realize who they've been dealing with. The next morning, I arrived early at Phoenix Enterprises headquarters, wearing my best power suit. My little shop would be fine without me for a few hours. After all, it was just a passion project, a creative outlet that had somehow become the family's favorite target for ridicule. As I sat in my top-floor office reviewing the merger documents one last time, I thought about how none of them had ever bothered to really look at my small business. If they had, they might have noticed that every piece of jewelry I sold was made with rare, ethically sourced gems that could only be acquired through very specific channels. Channels that, coincidentally, Global Tech had been trying to access for years. My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Mitchell? The Davidson Industries team has arrived." I smiled, standing up and smoothing my jacket. Perfect timing. Let's give them a warm welcome. Sometimes the smallest shops hide the biggest secrets. And my family was about to learn that lesson the hard way. I watched through the one-way glass as my family entered the conference room. Dad looked confident as always, straightening his tie as he took his seat at the table. Amanda sat beside him, tapping away on her phone, probably updating her social media about being part of this historic deal. Mom chose to stand by the window, admiring the city view that ironically included my tiny shop several blocks below. "The CEO of Phoenix Enterprises will be joining us shortly," Sarah announced, setting water glasses on the table. I noticed how Amanda's eyes lingered appreciatively on my assistant's designer suit, probably assuming Sarah was the CEO's secretary. "I still don't understand why we need the parent company's approval," Dad grumbled. "We've already negotiated everything with Global Tech's board." I smiled, checking my reflection one last time. 5 years of careful planning, of keeping my true business identity separate from my family's knowledge, had led to this moment. I'd built Phoenix Enterprises from the ground up, using the gemstone connections I'd developed through my jewelry business to create a technology and resources empire that now controlled several major corporations including Global Tech. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the conference room door. The reaction was immediate. Dad's pen clattered to the table. Amanda's phone slipped from her fingers. Mom turned from the window and nearly stumbled. "Emma." Dad's voice cracked. "What are you doing here? This is a private meeting." I walked calmly to the head of the table, placing my briefcase down with deliberate slowness. "Actually, Dad, I'm right where I need to be. Sarah, please distribute the contracts." Amanda laughed nervously. "Oh my God, Emma, did you get a job as an assistant here? You should have told us." "Not quite," I said, sitting down and folding my hands on the table. "I'm the CEO and founder of Phoenix Enterprises. Have been for 5 years now." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face had gone from confused to pale to slightly green. Mom had to sit down. "That's impossible," Amanda sputtered. "You run that little jewelry shop." "Yes, I do," I agreed, enjoying their confusion. "It's my passion project. But it's also how I discovered a very lucrative opportunity in the gemstone market. An opportunity that helped me build this company." I opened the contract in front of me. "Now about this merger. There are some conditions we need to discuss." "Conditions?" Dad finally found his voice. "What conditions?" "Well, for starters, Davidson Industries' current leadership structure needs significant changes. Your company's treatment of junior employees is concerning, and your resistance to innovative ideas has made you stagnant." Dad's face reddened. "Now wait just a minute, Dash." "No, Dad, you wait," I cut him off firmly. "For years, you've dismissed my ideas, mocked my choices, and treated me like I was beneath you. You never once bothered to look closer at my tiny shop or ask about my other business ventures. You were so convinced I was a failure that you missed watching me become your boss." Amanda was still shaking her head in disbelief. But your shop, it's so small." "Size isn't everything, Amanda. Something you might have learned if you'd spent more time building sustainable businesses instead of chasing quick profits." I pulled out another document from my briefcase. "This is a complete restructuring plan for Davidson Industries. If you want this merger to happen, these changes are non-negotiable." Mom finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "Darling, surely we can discuss this as a family." "That's exactly what we're doing," I replied coolly. "Isn't this what you wanted? For me to meet with real business people? Well, here I am." I watched as Dad skimmed through the restructuring document, his face growing darker with each page. This would mean stepping down as CEO. Yes, it would. The new CEO will be someone who values innovation and understands modern business practices. Someone who doesn't judge success by the size of a storefront. The room fell silent again, broken only by the soft sound of Amanda sniffling. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. You have until tomorrow morning to decide, I said, standing up. Either accept these terms or we'll find another company to acquire. One that shares our vision for the future. As I walked toward the door, Dad called out, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Emma, wait. We didn't know. I turned back, meeting his eyes. No, you didn't. And that's exactly the problem. The next 24 hours were interesting to say the least. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members. Some angry, some pleading, some trying to negotiate. I ignored them all, spending the evening in my tiny shop, working on a new jewelry design while the business empire I'd built quietly reshuffled the cards of power. Around midnight, I received an unexpected visitor. The bell chimed softly as Mom walked in, looking smaller somehow without her usual air of superiority. Your father's been up all night, she said quietly, running her finger along a display case. Reading through company reports, old project proposals, especially the ones you submitted years ago. I continued working on the emerald necklace in front of me. Find anything interesting? He found that sustainable energy proposal you submitted when you first graduated. The one he dismissed as impractical. Turns out Global Tech implemented something very similar last year. It made them millions. 200 million actually, I corrected, setting down my tools. I sold them the refined version of that same proposal through Phoenix Enterprises. Mom sank into one of the shop's vintage chairs. We really messed up, didn't we? You never saw me, I said simply. You were so busy looking down at this shop that you never bothered to look up and see what else I was building. The next morning, I arrived at Phoenix Enterprises to find my entire family waiting in the conference room. Dad looked like he hadn't slept. Amanda's designer outfit was slightly wrinkled and Mom's eyes were red. We accept your terms, Dad said as soon as I walked in, pushing the signed restructuring agreement across the table. I picked up the document, checking each signature carefully. All of them, including your resignation as CEO? He nodded stiffly. Yes. But I have one question. Why keep the shop? With all this? He gestured around at the gleaming office. Why bother with that small space? I smiled, thinking of the workshop where I still spent my happiest hours. Because that shop isn't about making money or proving anything. It's about creating something beautiful with my own hands. It's about passion, something you never understood about business. I understand now, he said quietly. Too late probably, but I understand. Over the next few months, Davidson Industries transformed under Phoenix Enterprises leadership. I appointed a promising young executive as CEO, someone who'd worked her way up from the bottom and understood the value of innovation. Dad stayed on as an advisor, learning more about modern business practices than he had in 20 years of running things his way. Amanda surprisingly showed the most growth. She started spending time at my shop, not to criticize but to learn. I never realized how much work goes into each piece, she admitted one day watching me work. Or how much you have to understand about global supply chains, rare materials, market dynamics. Business lessons can come from unexpected places, I told her. Sometimes the smallest shop can teach you more than the biggest boardroom. 6 months after the merger, I hosted a family dinner, not at some fancy restaurant but in my shop after hours. We sat among the displays, eating takeout and drinking wine from paper cups. I have something for each of you, I said, pulling out 3 small boxes. Inside each was a piece of jewelry I'd made myself. Cufflinks for Dad featuring the Davidson Industries logo reimagined. A delicate bracelet for Mom with stones from every country where Phoenix Enterprises operated. And for Amanda, a necklace designed to remind her that success comes in many sizes. These are amazing, Mom whispered, touching the stones gently. Each one tells a story. Yes, I agreed, looking around at my tiny shop that had started it all. They do. Dad cleared his throat. Emma, I owe you an apology. All those years I thought I was teaching you about business, but you were the one with the real lessons. I raised my paper cup. Here's to lessons learned. and to small shops with big secrets. As we sat there laughing and talking, I thought about success and how differently it can look from various angles. My family had finally learned to see beyond size and surface appearances, to understand that true business acumen isn't measured in square footage or corner offices. I never planned on buying my parents' apartment building. But then again, I never planned on them turning my 30th birthday dinner into another opportunity to belittle my life choices. The evening started like any other family gathering at Le Chateau, the upscale French restaurant my parents chose, not because I wanted it, but because it was where they could show off to their country club friends. I arrived early, smoothing down my simple black dress, the same one they'd criticized last Christmas for being off the rack. My father's voice boomed across the private dining room before I even saw him. "Catherine, there's our birthday girl, still dressing like a small-town secretary." He air-kissed my cheek, his expensive cologne overwhelming. My mother followed, her diamonds catching the light as she gave me a practiced smile. "Darling, we were just telling the Hamiltons about your, what do you call it? That little office job of yours." I took a slow sip of water, thinking about the stack of acquisition papers sitting on my desk at home. "It's property management, Mom. Just like I told you last month." Right, she waved her hand dismissively. "Such a shame you left Harrison and Brooks. You could have been partner by now like your brother Michael." Yes, Michael. The golden child who could do no wrong. Even now, at 35, he was still living off our parents' connections, his partner position more about who he knew than what he could do. "I'm doing fine, Mom." I tried to keep my voice neutral even as I felt the familiar twist in my stomach. The same feeling I'd had when I quit my soul-crushing corporate job 3 years ago to start my own company. "Fine." My father scoffed, raising his champagne glass. "Catherine, you work in a tiny office in that old building on 5th Street. The same building where we had to help you rent your first apartment because no one else would take you without a co-signer. If only they knew. That old building was just the beginning. Over the past 3 years, I'd quietly built Empire Property Holdings into one of the city's fastest-growing real estate investment firms. While they thought I was barely making rent, I was acquiring properties across 3 states. Speaking of that building," my mother continued, her voice dripping with false concern, "aren't you embarrassed to still be living there? All your cousins own homes in the Heights by now." I felt my phone buzz in my purse. Probably Jessica, my assistant, with updates about our latest acquisition. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my parents sipped champagne and lamented my life choices, I was about to close a deal that would change everything. "Actually," I started but was cut off by my father's booming voice. "Everyone a toast." He raised his glass, drawing attention from the other guests, mostly their friends, not mine. "To Catherine still working that tiny job. Maybe this year she'll finally come to her senses and let me get her a real position at the firm." The crystal glasses clinked, the sound mixing with polite laughter. I saw the Hamiltons exchange knowing looks, their faces a mix of pity and amusement. This was exactly why I'd kept my success quiet. In their world, success only counted if it came through their approved channels. Just then the dining room door opened. Jessica walked in, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to the party atmosphere. She carried a leather portfolio. The one I knew contained the final paperwork for today's acquisition. "Ms. Walker," she said, using my professional name. "I apologize for interrupting, but there's something that requires your immediate attention." My mother frowned. "Catherine, dear, can't your little work crisis wait? We're about to cut the cake." Jessica's eyes met mine, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Actually, Mrs. Walker, this concerns you and Mr. Walker as well. It's about your building." "Our building?" My father's brow furrowed. "What could you possibly have to do with our building?" I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress. 3 years of being underestimated, of smiling through their condescension, had led to this moment. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. You see, Empire Property Holdings just acquired the entire Hamilton Heights complex." My mother's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. "Empire, what?" "Empire Property Holdings," Jessica repeated clearly, opening her portfolio. "Your building's new owner. Or should I say," she looked at me, "Ms. Walker is your new owner." The champagne glass slipped from my mother's grip, shattering against the hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent room, crystalline shards scattering like the pieces of their perfect world. My father's face had turned an interesting shade of red. This is absurd. That complex is worth millions. You can't possibly. 12 million to be exact. I cut in smoothly. Though we got it for 10.5. The previous owner was quite motivated to sell. The room had gone completely still. Even the waiters had stopped in their tracks, sensing the dramatic shift in atmosphere. The Hamiltons were suddenly very interested in their dessert plates. Jessica, I said calmly, would you mind showing my parents the paperwork? I believe they'll find everything in order. As Jessica stepped forward with the documents, I caught my reflection in one of the restaurant's mirrors. I looked different somehow. Stronger. No longer the disappointing daughter they'd spent years trying to reshape into their image of success. My mother's voice came out as a whisper. But, how? I smiled, thinking of all the nights I'd worked late, the risks I'd taken, the deals I'd crafted while they thought I was just playing at business. It turns out that tiny job of mine isn't so tiny after all. The night was far from over, but in that moment, watching my parents' perfectly maintained facade crumble, I realized something important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with a property deed and a foreclosure notice. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. My father was the first to recover, his face shifting from shock to something darker, more calculated. I recognized that look. It was the same one he wore when closing hostile takeovers at his firm. Catherine, he said, his voice eerily calm, let's discuss this privately. He gestured toward the restaurant's terrace. Actually, I smiled, taking my seat again, anything you have to say can be said right here. After all, isn't this what birthdays are for? Family revelations. Jessica remained standing beside me, a quiet pillar of support. She'd been with me since the beginning, back when Empire Property Holdings was nothing more than a dream and a small office above a Chinese restaurant. She knew every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every deal that had led to this moment. This is ridiculous, my mother hissed, her perfectly manicured hands trembling as she reached for another champagne glass. You expect us to believe you own Hamilton Heights? The most prestigious apartment complex in the city. Not just Hamilton Heights, Jessica interjected, pulling out another document. Ms. Walker's portfolio includes 15 properties across 3 states, including the Marina Towers in Boston and the Riverside Complex in Chicago. The Hamiltons, who had been pretending not to listen, suddenly choked on their dessert. Mrs. Hamilton's eyes widened. They owned a unit in Marina Towers. My father's mask of calm cracked slightly. Impossible. We would have heard something. The board members. You mean the Thompson Group? I asked innocently. They're quite good at keeping things quiet when asked. Especially when the buyer prefers to operate through shell companies. A memory flashed through my mind, my father's voice 3 years ago. Property management? That's not a real career, Catherine. You're just playing at business. The rent increases, my mother whispered, realization dawning. The new security systems, the lobby renovation. That was all you? I nodded. The building needed updating. Though I have to say your complaints to the management office about every little change were quite detailed. Jessica has quite a file. Jessica suppressed a smile, remembering the countless angry emails from my mother about the new lobby furniture being too modern, and the security cameras being invasive. Why? My father demanded, his voice rising. Why go behind our backs like this? Behind your backs? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I tried telling you about my company dozens of times. Every family dinner, every holiday. But you were too busy praising Michael's latest handed to him promotion or criticizing my little job to listen. The mention of Michael made my mother flinch. My perfect older brother was notably absent tonight, probably still dealing with the fallout from his latest failed investment, though my parents would never acknowledge that. Speaking of Michael, Jessica said, pulling out yet another document, he's been quite persistent about renting one of the penthouse units. His application crossed my desk this morning. My mother's face paled. Michael had told them he was buying the penthouse, not renting. Another lie they'd chosen to believe. That's enough. My father stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Whatever game you're playing, Catherine, it stops now. I'll have my lawyers look into this tomorrow. Your lawyers? I raised an eyebrow. You mean Harrison and Brooks? They might be a bit busy. You see, they're currently reviewing their own lease agreement with Empire Properties. We acquired their building last month. The room spun with shocked whispers. Harrison and Brooks was one of the city's oldest law firms, and my father's personal counsel for 30 years. Mrs. Walker, Jessica spoke up, her voice professionally detached. While we're discussing business matters, I should inform you about the upcoming changes to Hamilton Heights. The board has approved several renovations which will unfortunately require a temporary rent increase. My mother's face went from pale to crimson. You wouldn't dare. Actually, I took another sip of water. The notices went out this morning. A 40% increase effective next month. Of course, if that's too burdensome, we can discuss alternative arrangements. Alternative arrangements? My father's voice was dangerous now. Yes. The garage level has several recently renovated units. They're smaller, but the rent is much more reasonable. Perfect for tenants on a fixed income. The same garage level units my mother had complained about last Christmas, saying they were barely fit for the help. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. This is how you repay us. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I stood slowly, placing my napkin on the table. You mean like telling me I'd never succeed on my own? Or turning every family gathering into a chance to remind me what a disappointment I am? Or perhaps you mean co-signing my first apartment lease, which, by the way, you never let me forget. The other guests were openly staring now, their desserts forgotten. The birthday cake sat untouched, its candles unlit. I built this company from nothing, I continued, my voice steady. No family connections. No trust fund. Just 18-hour days and a belief that I could succeed without your approval. Jessica handed me my coat, a simple black piece that probably cost more than my mother's entire outfit. Not that they'd ever noticed. The foreclosure notices go out next week, I said, gathering my things. Don't worry, I've arranged for all affected tenants to have priority access to our other properties. Though you might want to start packing soon. The garage units fill up quickly. You can't do this, my mother whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Actually, I can. And I did. I turned to the stunned party guests. Thank you all for coming. Please enjoy the cake. I hear the vanilla buttercream is excellent. As I walked toward the door, Jessica close behind, I heard my father call out one last time. Catherine, you'll regret this. Family is all you have. I paused at the doorway, looking back at the scene, the scattered champagne glass shards, the shocked faces, the crumbled facade of family perfection. No, Dad. Family is all you had. I have an empire. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click. In the elevator, Jessica finally let her professional mask slip, breaking into a grin. Happy birthday, Ms. Walker. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Thank you, Jessica. Though I have to say your timing was impeccable. I learned from the best, she replied, checking her phone. By the way, the Marina Towers deal just closed. You now own Mrs. Hamilton's building too. I laughed as we stepped into the cool night air. My phone was already buzzing with messages. Probably relatives who'd heard about the dinner's dramatic ending. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to answer them. Sometimes success isn't about proving others wrong. Sometimes it's about proving yourself right. And sometimes, just sometimes, it comes with the satisfaction of watching a champagne glass shatter against the floor of an overpriced French restaurant.